Hey everybody, welcome back to Bleeding Cool's weekly recap of The Walking Dead Season 8. My name is Ray Fluke, television beat writer. Let me start off by full confession. We had the Oscars coverage last night, so things got a little screwy. Then we ran into some tech issues. So for those of you who joined in on our live blog last night, I know we really kind of only got it rolling towards, I'd say, probably the last 30 minutes or so. But we will be back up and running again Sunday at our normal time. But we are here for the recap, and we're going to be taking a look at the 10th episode of this season, The Lost and the Plunderers. Let me start off, and even I'm going to be referring to my notes as we get a little more detail, but I just want to start off with an overall view. This was a dramatically better episode than the first one, the mid-season premiere honor last week. The emotional weight and level of depression was so strong and heavy and meaningful. You saw some amazing performances from a number of the cast throughout, and again, I really like the way they did it by chapters and names. What I also especially like is something I was hoping for. Last week's episode, I was numb to it. It just felt like it was a really long, drawn-out death scene for Carl. And again, I'm not going to beat up on anybody in regards to that. I went into my discussion about what I thought about Chandler Riggs and acting and being able to pull off certain scenes. What I had hoped for and what I think we are seeing is the importance of Carl now that he's gone. Like, what level of importance does he play? And I think we got to see that in some direct and indirect levels in each of the chapters that we go through. And that's, again, what I'm hoping for is that if we're going to give Carl's death some major importance, if it's not going to happen in the actual dying, which, again, I don't think it did, it is happening in the sense of symbolism and what that will mean moving forward. This was a very strong episode. It is not, however, an episode, if you are fans of Rick and Hilltop and Alexandria and everybody else, this is not a happy episode. Not by any stretch of the imagination. By the end of this episode, you were left wondering yourself, like, wasn't there a point where they were really, really close to just kind of ending and wrapping this up? So, again, but we're going to be covering a recap, covering my notes. But as I said, the episode's done in chapters and sections, which I'm going to be honest with you, from a recap review standpoint, makes life a lot easier. But we start off with Michonne, and essentially Rick and Michonne, but the chapter is centering on Michonne. Michonne is there to essentially help, to be there for Carl, to help bury Carl, and to be there for Rick. But we see the ramifications of what all this is having on Michonne as she looks around at Alexandria, and you can see in her eyes the memories she had of a place that was once beautiful and thriving and had the potential to be so much more. And all she sees now are walkers and destruction and fires and again, just burning memories of how things used to be. There is a scene where she goes up to a porch and she sees in blue paint, which I think the blue paint's very interesting analogy later on. Blue handprints of a child's on the porch, and obviously on a variety of levels, she just loses it at that point. Her and Rick are basically getting ready to go. She sees a gazebo on fire, and she tells Rick, "Look, this is Rick. Carl and I used to sit on top of this, and we used to talk. I can't let this burn." And there's just something sad and tragically heartbreaking as they're running at this thing to just hit it up with fire extinguishers while they're fighting off walkers, and it just can't happen. And Rick just has to be the one to finally say to her, "Look, we gotta go. We can't keep doing this." So we cut to a scene where they were driving along, and Rick asks Michonne a very important question. What do you think he meant in regards to what Carl meant when he told his father, "I need you to stop fighting. I need you to stop fighting"? And Rick's mindset is, you want me to stop fighting, so I just surrender and turn myself over to Negan, everything like that. So we know where Rick's mindset is, and if you don't know it at this point, you're going to find out later on. He mentions to Michonne about that Carl had written letters, and that's when Michonne mentions to Rick, you know, he wrote a letter to Negan also, and offers the idea of, like, do you want to pull over and read him? But Rick's just not in that place yet. Instead, Rick wants to go to see Jadis. And this is where I kind of got hopeful for a second, because it gave me the impression Rick was concerned about the safety and well-being for Jadis and the scavengers because of the double, triple, quadruple dealing that they had done with Rick and with the Saviors. But then he hits this line later on, and I think it strikes back to the problems that Carl has with his dad and what he needs from his dad to do, where he goes, "They're ours, not theirs." So we realize Rick doesn't really care about the scavengers as human beings. It's essentially as weapons and property, and it's better to be in their wheelhouse than in the Savior's wheelhouse, which was just, again, it's like your son died. It's still not getting through to you. Okay, we cut to Negan. That is our next chapter, and for those of you who have posted the scene several times, but there's a great moment where he's talking with Simon in the beginning, who he's ushered in to kind of give him some direction on what to do, and he says, "Damn, that kid's built for this shit." and he's talking about Carl. And again, we see the ramifications of what the influence that Carl has. Because let's be honest, at the end there, especially dealing with Negan, Carl gave Negan really, really, really well for the exchanges and the back and forth that they have. But Simon and Negan's starting to understand very, very quickly now as he's concentrating as lieutenants that Simon is a raging psychotic. And comes to Negan with the idea of, well, hell, we can take care of the scavengers just by using a little extra ammo and wiping them all off the face of the earth. Which, again, goes against the idea of you don't kill people who you can use as you were building up society. Say whatever you want to about Negan, but Negan seems to really believe in the whole, we are here to save people. In fact, he says the line, I want to make sure we get, what we do, saving people, it's hard, but it damn well works. But then Simon hits him with the not lately. And I like this contrast where it's, as much as Rick may have had problems with his people, because Tara, Daryl, everybody kind of splintered the plan, Negan here's people, as we see in a little bit, are kind of questioning his leadership and starting to go in their own direction too. So we see Rick and Negan being two sides of the same coin with regards to how their philosophies are. And Negan's going to realize very, very soon, I think in the next couple episodes, that the people closest to him aren't exactly the ones he can trust. We then see a point where, guess what? Negan and Simon got Maggie's gift from last season, the member of the Savior, who she killed and put in a box and said, there's more, get ready to stand down. Yeah, they got the message. Now, of course, Simon's answer is the same as he went for the scavengers, which is just, hey, send me out there and let me just kill and destroy everybody and everything. And there's just a nasty, nasty exchange between Negan and Simon, where Negan pretty much has to, I guess, lay the Lucille down on him. Not literally, but just kind of like, just in case there's any questions of who's in charge and who does what, yeah, I'm still in charge. So, but you already know right off the bat, this is just not going to go anywhere. And spoiler, it really doesn't go well. It really doesn't. Get to our next chapter. We get to Enid with Aaron. And again, those of you who don't remember, yeah, things went really, really, really bad when Cindy's grandmother got killed by Enid. So we're seeing Enid and Aaron being tied up and brought in, and Cindy's the one who's given the opportunity to decide what happens to them. Enid, though, comes to a point of understanding, and again, I think this is where the Carl conversation and influence come in. Enid's thing is like, look, essentially in that scene, through her blank stare and her words to Aaron, you get to understand, like, I had to kill. I would do it again if I had to. This is the horror of it, and I understand and appreciate it. She's not callous and cold to it. She's dealing with it and processing it. She understands what happens, and that's something that she expresses to Cindy. You know, they're ready to now march. Osha's ready to march them down to the beach and execute them. And Enid's basically saying to Cindy, what's this going to prove? Your grandmother got herself killed. You attack and come at strangers. You killing us is just going to create a back and forth that's going to escalate, and you will eventually lose. Now, again, it's interesting we see this constant back and forth in philosophies of how long do you want to keep perpetuating this. Enid speaking the same truths that Carl was trying to speak to his dad. And I think, again, those themes running through were very effective. So Cindy decides, okay, well, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to basically exile you out of here. Don't come back here. We don't have anything to do with your war. Give us a heads up if you win. Now, Aaron decides, I'm going to stay around the area because I have to convince them to fight no matter what. It's just, Aaron's one of those characters I hope we don't see off screen a lot, because I've really started to grow to like his character also. He tells Enid to go back, which I do think is important. Enid is one of those people that Maggie needs to have by her side. She's just one of those faithful, loyal people. And honestly, a character, again, who's evolved over time, who I've really, really liked and really, really come to respect. Again, heartbreaking scene at the end where Enid's trying to get Aaron to promise her that he's going to be safe and he's going to be okay. He's trying to get her to promise the same thing. And then there's just that damn hug. And it's just like, wow. Again, this show was crushing me so much 30, 35, 40 minutes in than what I got out of 86 minutes of last week. Again, I'm not just trying to beat up on the mid-season premiere, but when there's so much possibilities and then you see this episode and you're like, okay, this is actually how it could and should be. So, we cut to Simon. Well, not going to be a lot of touchy-feelies on Simon's part. Lo and behold, Simon comes marching in, and Simon gives his whole message and everything, and he's talking about how Jadis and everybody should be thankful because Negan's giving him a gift, and they don't have to pay a price or anything like that. But of course, Simon, being the psychotic that he is going to keep pushing the issue and feels like Jadis isn't offering enough remorse. So how does Simon solicit remorse? Kills one person. Okay, you're thinking to yourself, you're watching it, okay, Negan asked for one, that's the one. Not remorseful enough. Kills a second person. Jadis, of course, seeing this, flips out, punches Simon. It's exactly what Simon was waiting for. They just open fire on all the scavengers and leave Jadis. So in a sense, Simon, in his sick, twisted little punchline, just won. He did live up to Negan's technical phrase, just won. Just Negan would actually have liked to have the scavengers still be around and still be a resource. After Simon's gotten through to them, that's not a problem and that's not an issue anymore. That gave a sense now of who really, really, really is the big bad in this situation. But it's very telling. He's got blue paint on his shoes. So very curious to see if that comes into play, because we see towards the end of his segment, he looks down and sees it. And I can't help but also look at the analogy between the blue paint, and I'm sure that's for deeper thinking that I don't have at this point. But I thought the connection was very interesting between the two segments, when Michonne saw the blue hand paints on the porch and the blue paint on Simon's shoes. I'm wondering if that's not some kind of clue that will tee off Negan to what Simon's been doing. Then we get to Jadis. Now, when we last left, Rick and Michonne, they were at the scavengers area. They were being attacked by a whole bunch of walkers that turned out to be, now that we're caught up in time, the scavengers. The scavengers are going after them, so Rick and Michonne are trying to climb up to a trash heap, and who do they find? Jadis, who has just completely lost it, and starts telling us the backstory about how the junkyard used to be an area she would go to paint. There would just be amazing canvases and things like that to work off of. And it's heartbreaking because this, and I want to get this quote right, this in case you heard the paper, it's, this whole place was a canvas and we were the paint. We could create something new. We could be something new. And that's what they were attempting to do. And it's all lost now. Now, of course, Rick, in his particular compassionate way, really takes this moment to try and tell her, oh, yeah, all this happened because of you, by the way, and essentially you suck, so you should own it. Also, does nothing to actually save Jadis when she's actually asking them for help. He does this thing where he shoots above the head, which reminded me a lot of, again, not learning anything, what you did with Sadiq. And again, not learning from Carl. And then you run out, essentially leaving her to all of her people who are now walkers and will try to kill her. So we see Jadis pushed to the edge, who comes up with the ultimate plan. We call it zombie meat grinder, and I hate to use that phrase because it's so not cool about it, because it makes it seem not important. But the scene where she's watching her people just fall into the meat grinder and all of that, and you see the look on her face, and that's why I want to say at this point, that's where I feel like we just saw the makings of Season 9. I think in Jadis what we saw was alpha, and I think we saw the beginning of the Whisperers. I think there is just no doubt about it. Okay, last segment, Rick pulls over, starts to read the notes. We're getting caught up in time. In the Negan segment at the end, Negan is notified that Rick's on the walkie-talkie and wants to talk to him. We now see Rick's end of things. And Rick starts notifying, tells Negan that Carl died, and starts explaining to him what had happened. And it's this thing where Rick is telling Negan, like, look, he wants you to stop fighting. He wants me to stop fighting. He wants us to work together. But Rick's like, it's too late. I'm going to kill you. We've gone too far, everything like that. Now, Negan, in all honesty, I think he meant it in regards to the whole, but Rick at this point, telling him that he's the bad father, he's the reason why Carl died, all these bad decisions, everything like that, one, is not a smart move. Two, it's really blindside to the idea of how much Negan and the Saviors really contributed to this overall big problem. But what I loved about it is essentially you had two fathers raging at each other for the death of a boy that both of them could have prevented. And now they just see this end game as a spiraling thing of each other being, of their hands at each other's throats. Which is an interesting analogy, actually, because I'm very curious to see if this show ends up going the direction of the comic book. I will connect you back to the end of the first episode of the second half, when we see at the end when Rick is slumped there and he's speaking his words to Carl and his one hand is bloody. I think that's a flash forward, but just keep that in mind. But that's it, folks. I hope you really liked the episode. I'm going to be honest with you, I thought it was a vast improvement. If I'm going to use my Cusack scoring on a scale of 1 to 10, I would have given this episode somewhere between an 8 and 8.5. I think it hit on so many emotional cylinders. It was fantastic. I thought it was a major leap up from the first episode. I'm very curious to see where they lead. It looks like next week's episode is going to be a lot more action-oriented. Dead or Alive or is what it's called. And it looks like it's going to be very Daryl-centered, and Rosita too, as they're trying to make their way back to the Hilltop. So thank you guys for joining me. We will be back next week for the next recap of The Walking Dead and review of The Walking Dead. My name is Ray Flick, television beat writer. See you guys online. Take care.